He came home early that day to silence, and then something strange. Laughter, not just any laughter, his daughter's. The same daughter who hadn't smiled in nearly 2 years, the same little girl who used to stare at walls like she wasn't even alive inside. And when he followed the sound, what he saw made him freeze, because the one bringing his child back to life wasn't a doctor, wasn't a therapist. It was the maid. A woman he hadn't even noticed. A woman who walked past him in silence. A woman heaven sent, wearing a blue dress, holding a broken child, and carrying something even money couldn't buy. What he witnessed in that hallway would break him, then save him. Benjamin King could buy anything, but not his daughter's joy. He was the kind of man who signed billion-dollar deals from a private jet, the kind who owned houses he never lived in, wore suits stitched by hand in Milan, and shook hands with presidents like they were peers. But in the quiet halls of his home, none of that mattered. His wife, Clara, was gone, taken by a car crash that left nothing behind but a grieving child and a man who didn't know how to grieve at all. Since then, their daughter Sonia had changed, from a bright laughing girl to something else, still breathing but barely living. Her eyes didn't light up. Her mouth forgot how to smile. She was like a flower kept in the dark. Benjamin tried to fix it the only way he knew how: spend more, do more, control more. Therapists, toys, private specialists from across the globe. But nothing reached her. And the truth was, he couldn't bear to see her like that. So he stopped coming home. Until one Tuesday, a meeting got cancelled, and he walked into his house unexpectedly. What he saw, what he heard, he still can't explain it. But that moment, that holy, quiet moment at the end of the hallway, was the beginning of something he didn't ask for and didn't deserve. A miracle. And the vessel God chose to bring it was a 27-year-old maid. Quiet, unnoticed, carrying not just a mop and bucket, but a calling. But before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell us where you're watching from. I pray this story reminds you that God often hides his greatest answers in the people we overlook the most. He used to come home late. Now, he hardly came home at all. The house was always spotless. The floors gleamed, the air smelled like lemon polish, and the silence stretched longer than the hallways. Benjamin King lived in a world of glass and metal, contracts, calendars, quiet elevators and cold boardrooms. He was 45 years old and undefeated in every room. Except one. Sonia's. She was 6, small, still, too quiet for her age. Sometimes she sat at the window for hours, watching nothing. She didn't cry anymore, didn't run down the stairs or ask for bedtime stories, just sat, like she was waiting for something that would never come back. Sometimes Benjamin stood in the doorway, briefcase still in hand, and just looked at her, wanting to fix it, unable to fix it. And when the weight became too much, he did what he'd learned to do: work harder, stay away longer, because numbers didn't cry. Spreadsheets didn't look disappointed when he failed. 2 years ago, Clara died on a mountain road. It was sudden, unfair, brutal. A simple trip turned into a call from the sheriff's department. He remembered dropping the phone. He remembered the sound of his daughter's voice breaking behind him. And after that, he remembered nothing. Just noise, just fog, just meetings. Now the house stood like a monument. Big, beautiful, lifeless. He'd filled it with expensive art and rare orchids, security gates, motion sensors, imported tiles from Italy. But love didn't echo off those walls. Not anymore. His staff knew the rules. Keep it clean, keep it quiet. Don't interrupt him unless it's urgent. The nannies rotated, the therapists quit, and the little girl in the corner window just kept fading. One morning, the agency sent someone new, a maid, early 20s, brown skin, tired eyes, soft smile. She arrived with a cloth bag and no questions. Her name was Stella Brown. He didn't meet her. His assistant handled it. Just another employee in a long line of strangers paid to fill in the silence. But what no one saw, what Benjamin couldn't have guessed, was that this quiet young woman didn't just carry cleaning supplies. She carried something sacred, something planted deep inside her through her own grief, her own loss, her own prayers. God had sent someone into that house, and he didn't need permission to begin healing. Most mornings, Sonia sat in the same window seat. It was her mother's favorite corner of the house, the one that caught the softest light just after sunrise, the one where Clara used to sing while brushing Sonia's hair, her voice barely louder than the wind in the trees. Now it was Sonia's place, still, quiet, watching. Sometimes she pressed her cheek against the glass, as if hoping the cold would remind her she was still here. Sometimes she traced the fog from her breath just to see something move. She didn't speak much anymore, only when necessary, and only in soft answers like her voice didn't trust the world. Benjamin watched from a distance. He never knew how to enter the room without breaking something. He tried once, sat beside her on the bench, showed her a new tablet with a glowing screen. She stared at it, then looked away. She wasn't ungrateful. She was just unreachable, like her soul had slipped behind a wall too high for him to climb. He hated that wall, hated that he didn't know how to pray his way through it, and didn't know who to blame more, God or himself. Clara would have known what to do. Clara always knew. There were days he swore he could still hear her, footsteps in the kitchen, a soft laugh in the hallway, the way she used to hum while making pancakes on Sundays. But it was memory, ghost, habit, and none of it brought their daughter back. The staff had learned not to make noise around Sonia, not to ask too many questions, not to expect smiles. They called her a sweet little girl and meant it, but you could hear the helplessness in their voices. And then there was Stella. She didn't follow the others' lead, didn't walk on eggshells or treat Sonia like glass. She sang while she swept, soft hymns, old lullabies, songs Sonia's mother might have loved. At first, Sonia didn't react. She just listened, eyes turned to the window, but her hand twitched, just slightly, just enough. And one afternoon when Stella passed through the hallway with her bucket and broom, she paused near the window, smiled gently and said, "That sun looks like it's trying to find your face today." Sonia blinked, and for the first time in a long time she didn't look away. Stella Brown moved through the house like she belonged everywhere, and nowhere. She wasn't loud, she wasn't intrusive, but she was present, in a way few people knew how to be. The housekeeper called her efficient. The chef said she had kind eyes. Benjamin still hadn't spoken to her. He hadn't needed to. She clocked in quietly each morning, kept to her tasks, and vanished into the rhythm of the mansion. She noticed the way Stella folded towels like origami. Soft corners, neat folds, one for each shape. She noticed how she hummed while wiping the windows, how the sound seemed to float, gentle as breath, like it was trying not to wake the grief inside the walls. Sonia never looked directly at her, but her eyes followed her when she passed. That afternoon, the sky outside was bruised with grey, the kind of day that made everything feel heavier. Sonia sat curled up near the kitchen doorway, small arms wrapped around her knees, her face pressed into the red fabric of her mother's scarf. No one noticed her there. Not the chef, not the nanny, not the assistant who bustled past with a tablet in hand. But Stella did. She was carrying a basket of folded sheets when she turned the corner and stopped. No words, no panic, just stillness. She crouched slowly, her knees soft against the marble floor, and set the basket down beside her. Then, carefully, she sat, not across from Sonia, not above her, but beside her, close enough to be felt, far enough not to press. They sat like that for a while, two figures in silence. Then Stella spoke, not loud, not forced, just real. "You ever fold a towel into a swan?" Sonia didn't answer, didn't move. "It's harder than it looks," Stella said, smiling faintly. "But sometimes it helps, when your hands are doing something kind." Still no reply, so Stella didn't push. She stood up gently, lifted the basket again, and began to walk away. But just before she turned the corner, a voice, barely a whisper, floated up behind her. "What kind of swan?" Stella stopped. She turned her head slightly, met the little girl's eyes for the first time, and in that moment, Something passed between them. Not loud, not sudden, but holy. The kind of connection that doesn't ask permission, the kind that only God can thread. It started with napkins. Stella found Sonia sitting by the window again, legs tucked under her, her fingers playing with the edge of her sleeve. She didn't ask if the little girl wanted to help. She just sat nearby, laid a pile of soft linen across the coffee table, and began folding. Quietly, slowly, one crease at a time. She whispered to the napkins like they were secrets. You can be a mountain, or maybe a boat, or a butterfly if you're brave. Sonia didn't speak, but she watched. After a few minutes, Stella slid one folded shape across the table and left it there, halfway between them. Sonia reached out, touched it, didn't look up. The next day it was spoons, then paper towels, then socks. The work didn't matter. It was never about that. It was about presence, about doing something side by side, without needing to say why. And little by little, Sonia started reaching back, a nod, a shrug, a whisper. Until one afternoon, when Stella dropped a sock and made a clumsy little spin trying to catch it mid-air, Sonia giggled, not loudly, not for long, but it was real, a sound that hadn't lived in that house in nearly 2 years. The hallway was empty except for them. Sunlight slipped in through the window, catching the dust in golden streaks, and there, on a patch of hardwood floor between chores and shadows, a little girl laughed. Stella froze for just a second. Her heart clenched, her throat burned. Then she smiled, wide, grateful, silent, because she knew what that sound meant. Sonia didn't laugh again that day, but she stayed close after that. She hovered near the kitchen when Stella cleaned the counters. She sat on the stairs when Stella polished the rail, always watching, always listening. And on the 5th day, when Stella crouched down to organize a cupboard, Sonia climbed gently onto her back, wrapped her small arms around her neck, and whispered, "Let's fly." It came from nowhere. It came from somewhere deep. Stella didn't ask what she meant. She just rose to her feet, hands holding the child's legs, and began walking slowly down the hall, arms out wide. And Sonia laughed again, this time louder, this time longer. It echoed down the hallway, it echoed through the silence, and it echoed through something else too, something just down the corridor, where Benjamin King stood, frozen, his hand on the edge of the study door. He didn't move, didn't breathe. That sound, he hadn't heard it in so long. That night, Benjamin sat in his office long after the house had gone quiet. The room was dim, just the amber glow of his desk lamp, the quiet hum of the air vents, and the untouched scotch in the crystal glass beside him. But he wasn't working. He was remembering. The sound of Sonia's laughter still hung in his ears like a melody he thought he'd forgotten. And the image, Stella walking down the hallway with his daughter on her back, both of them with arms wide like wings, had looped in his mind 100 times. It had caught him off guard, not just the joy in Sonia's voice, but the feeling it stirred in him. It hurt. Not the sharp kind of pain, not anymore, but the ache of missing something for too long and realizing you never had to. He hadn't known how to reach her. He'd tried everything the world said to try. But what had worked wasn't strategy, wasn't science, wasn't anything he could write a check for. It was kindness, softness, the presence of someone who hadn't been trying to fix Sonia, just to be with her. Across the house, Sonia was different now. She'd started asking for music during dinner, not loud, just soft piano songs Clara used to play when she cooked. She'd begun speaking in full sentences again. Her words still came slow, like waking from a long sleep. But they came. She even asked a question at breakfast. Where does the sun go when it's tired? Benjamin didn't know how to answer, so he just smiled. Maybe it rests the way we do. She nodded, and that was enough. The staff had noticed too. Whispers moved through the hallways. She's coming back to life. Do you think it's the new maid? But no one said it too loud. as if speaking, it might undo it. Stella kept working like nothing had changed, still folding, still humming, still moving through the house with quiet dignity. She never overstepped, never asked for anything. She just kept showing up, like she was there on purpose, like maybe someone bigger than all of them had placed her there. And maybe Benjamin was starting to believe that was true, because the woman who cleaned his home was slowly healing it too. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone in the hallway. It wasn't planned. The meeting in London had been rescheduled. The jet was fueled and waiting, but something told him, go home, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know what else to do with the ache. He didn't call ahead, didn't alert his assistant or security. He just landed, stepped into the black car waiting for him, and told the driver one word, home. The house was quiet when he arrived. No staff at the door, no footsteps echoing down the marble. Just silence. And then laughter. High, pure, unrestrained. It stopped him mid-step. He stood in the foyer, his briefcase still in hand, his coat still on, heart suddenly too loud in his chest. It was her, Sonia, laughing. He hadn't heard that sound in so long, it felt foreign, like something holy and heartbreaking all at once. He followed the sound slowly, unsure whether to believe it, whether if he got too close it would vanish again. But when he turned the corner, he froze. There in the long sunlit hallway, Stella was running barefoot, arms stretched wide like wings, her maid's uniform fluttering as Sonia clung to her back. Giggling, bright-eyed, alive. They soared past him, neither of them noticing him standing there. Sonia's red dress caught the light. Her little arms were wrapped tight around Stella's shoulders. Her laughter danced through the air like it had been waiting for years to be let out. Benjamin didn't speak, didn't move. Something inside him cracked, not loudly, not all at once, but like glass under pressure, finally giving way. He felt it in his throat, in his chest, behind his eyes. That was his daughter. That joy was hers, and it hadn't come from him. He leaned against the wall, hand to his face, not to hide, but to feel. All this time, he'd been trying to buy healing, but healing had entered quietly, through the back door, wearing an apron, and carrying Grace in her arms. He stayed there for a long time, watching them disappear down the hallway, and when the sound faded into silence again, he whispered under his breath, "Thank you, God, for sending her." Even if he didn't understand it yet, even if it broke something in him, he knew this. Nothing would be the same now. That night, the house didn't feel quite so silent. The laughter was gone, yes, but its echo still hung in the air like it had left a mark on the walls. Benjamin sat at the edge of his bed, still in his dress shirt, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes unfocused. He hadn't said anything to Stella, hadn't spoken to Sonia, hadn't touched his dinner. He was holding something heavier than hunger. Truth. And truth, when you've spent years outrunning it, arrives like a slow burn. He opened the file on his desk later that night, the one labeled Brown Stella domestic contract. He hadn't looked at it before, hadn't needed to, but now he read every line. 27 years old. Originally from upstate New York, some college, incomplete. Under education, a note, early childhood development, grief therapy track. Paused due to family hardship. Benjamin leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes. There was so much he didn't know, so much he hadn't bothered to know. She wasn't just a maid. She had studied the very thing his daughter needed, not in theory, but through life. God had placed someone in his house who carried not just knowledge, but understanding, not just skill, but compassion. And he had almost missed it. He remembered the way she ran down the hallway, not like a worker completing a task, but like someone who'd made herself small so a broken child could feel big again. He whispered into the dark, "I'm sorry." He didn't know who it was for. Clara, Sonia, Stella, maybe all of them, maybe God. The next morning he didn't wait. He asked the house manager to send Stella to his study. She entered quietly, eyes lowered, hands clasped. She was expecting it. A reprimand. Maybe worse. She was used to powerful men being uncomfortable with what they didn't understand. Benjamin stood as she walked in. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her. Really looked. And then, gently, he said, "Thank you." She blinked, unsure. He stepped closer. "You did something I couldn't. You found my daughter, and you gave her back to me." Her eyes filled, but she said nothing. "I overlooked you," he added quietly. "That's on me. But I see you now." A pause. "And I need your help. Not just with Sonia. With me." It was Clara's birthday. There were no candles, no cake, no decorations. Just a gentle breeze slipping through the curtains, and the weight of memory pressing on every surface of the house. Benjamin had arranged a small memorial, family only, quiet. But when Sonia heard the date, she asked for something more. "Can I dance for her?" She said it so softly he almost missed it. Benjamin looked at her, his daughter, still small, still healing, but brighter now, steadier. "Of course," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. She spent the next 2 days with Stella behind closed doors. They played music in the afternoons, practiced slow, gentle movements in the upstairs sunroom. It wasn't technical, it wasn't polished, but it was sacred. Sonia chose Clara's favorite song, an old jazz lullaby her mother used to hum while folding laundry, the kind of song that clings to the corners of memory like dust to light. The evening of the memorial, the family gathered in the garden. The grass was damp, the sky was beginning to soften into dusk. Benjamin sat in the front row, alone. Then Sonia stepped forward. She wore a soft red dress, one of Clara's, altered, resized, stitched by hand. Stella had found it in a storage box and brought it back to life. Sonia stood still at first, eyes closed. Then the music played. She didn't leap, she didn't spin. She simply moved, gently, honestly. Arms like ribbons, her steps unsure but intentional. And halfway through, Stella joined her. No spotlight, no stage, just two figures moving through the pain, through the silence, through something bigger than either of them. It wasn't about performance, it was about presence. Benjamin couldn't look away. There, in his backyard, where sorrow had once hung like fog, his daughter danced, not perfectly, not gracefully, but freely, joyfully. As if her body remembered something her heart had nearly forgotten, that she was still alive, still loved, still his. When the music ended, Sonia turned to the small crowd, cheeks flushed, chest rising. No applause came at first, only stillness. And then Benjamin stood, and for the first time in years he clapped. Soft at first, then stronger, and silently. He wept, not for what he'd lost, but for what God, in his mercy, had given back. 1 year later, the house no longer felt like a museum. The silence was different now, not heavy, not hollow, but peaceful, like something had settled where sorrow once lived. Sonia was thriving. She danced in the hallways. She asked questions. She laughed without fear that joy would be taken away. Her healing hadn't come through medicine or breakthroughs. It had come through presence, through someone who stayed. Benjamin? He was still a businessman, still signed deals, still wore tailored suits, but people noticed something different in him now. He listened longer, laughed easier, spoke softer. He didn't leave the house for as many days in a row. He made time for pancakes, for bedtime stories, for silly questions, because now he knew where the real legacy was. And Stella no longer wore a maid's uniform. She was now the founder and director of Little Lift, a grief-informed play and therapy center for children. Funded by Benjamin, built from her vision, rooted in the miracle of what had unfolded in one lonely mansion under God's quiet guidance. She never sought credit, but Benjamin made sure her name was on the door, because he hadn't just seen what she'd done, He'd seen who she was, and he would never overlook her again. Sometimes, after long days at the center, Stella still visited the house, not to work, but to see Sonia. One afternoon, Benjamin stood at the end of the hallway, leaning against the wall, watching as Sonia came racing down the corridor on Stella's back again. Same red dress, same laughter, same arms outstretched like wings. Only this time, Benjamin didn't stand frozen. He stepped forward, and as Sonia flew toward him, he opened his arms wide and caught her, not just with his hands, but with his whole heart. They all stood there, out of breath, smiling. No words, no need, because healing doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it comes softly, in the form of someone the world calls small, someone God calls chosen. Benjamin built skyscrapers, but nothing he'd ever built meant more than the home that had been rebuilt. One laugh, one prayer, one maid's quiet courage at a time. And Sonia? She laughed every day now, because someone saw her, because someone stayed, because love, the kind that heals, doesn't always come from the top floor. Sometimes it walks in quietly, in a blue dress and a heart full of God. If this story touched something deep in you, hold it close. Don't rush away from it, because sometimes the greatest miracles don't come through thunder or spotlight, but through people who walk in quietly and love like God does. And if you believe there's still good in the world, still kindness worth seeing, still stories worth telling, then you belong here. This is Elevated Heart Stories, where we tell the kind of stories that lift your spirit, soften your soul, and remind you what truly matters. So if this moved you, don't just leave, stay, subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and let us know in the comments, where did this story find you today? From our heart to yours, thank you for watching. And remember, God sees, God sends, and God still heals, always in the quietest ways.